Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Nicole Dickerson, aka JND, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a easy bookish gift guide because the holiday season has begun. So I think we're all a little bit panicking about what to get. So I've been watching tons of these videos and I think they're super helpful to see. So I'm going to make lots of recommendations from middle grade, YA, fantasy, and contemporary, comic books, and mangas. So this video won't be focusing on too many super hyped books because as a bookish guide, I feel like you'd want to introduce books that aren't publicized too often just because the likelihood of someone having read that book is very high. So I'm also going to take the time to compare the books that I recommend to other books you might have read. So yeah, let's get into it, starting with some middle grade options. Oh, and I will also be linking down a bunch of Esty stores that have like bookmarks and book sleeves. So if you're looking for just easy, like, what are they called, stocking stuffers, I will link them down below. I've ordered from all of these places and they deliver within the week or two, so I highly recommend placing those orders now, sooner rather than later, especially as things are gonna get busier as the holiday comes closer. So you know, yeah, so let's get started with some middle grade recs. Yes, the first book I'm going to mention is The Skin I'm In by Sharon G. Flank, and this is about a middle schooler, Malika, who is being bullied for her appearance, for being black, for being on the curvier side, and they're constantly calling her names and they just have a lot of mean jokes about her appearance, and she's trying to learn to love herself and appreciate herself. And there's a whole arc in the story about what is true friendship and how to value your self-worth. And I also really appreciate this book because there's actually a helpful adult in it, because sometimes, you know, middle grade YA, the students have to figure it out on their own, but this one actually has a great role model in it who is trying to assist her in establishing her moral compass and being like, hey Malika, like, you shouldn't do things just to please your classmates, if that makes sense. So I think this is a really great story for anyone in that middle grade age and even older, even high school. Like, I read this a couple years ago and I still found it very impactful, so I would highly recommend you taking a look at this. The next middle grade is by a more well-known author, but I don't feel like she's known more widely. I think she's known really well in the book community, and that is Jacqueline Woodson. My favorite book of hers is Harbor Me, and this is also a middle grade book. So these are, I believe, 8th graders or 7th graders. Harbor Me is all about a special needs group of kids, so about 6 or 8 of them. They're all vastly diverse, which is why I really love this story. It's not just the opinion of one black person, it's the opinion of someone of privilege, someone who's not, someone who's Hispanic, someone who's white, and it's all these kids who share this similarity of being special needs. I was in special needs until middle grade, like from 1st grade all the way till middle school, so I really felt seen in this book. So if you're looking for that representation, this is it. Or if you're looking for a book with lots of good representation, I would recommend this. There are very healthy discussions about different perspectives here and privilege, and talking about your privilege versus others, but also in a, not a comparison, not in a unhealthy way. It's very healthy, and the story really gauges around the teacher telling these students that they need to talk to each other because they're all very isolated and there's a lot of grief happening. There's a loss of family member. So just taking the time to be open and vulnerable to each other, and it's just a wonderful story, and I highly recommend the audiobook too. And if you could find the interview Jacqueline Woodson does with her son, who I think was also a middle schooler when they did the interview together, it was in the audiobook that I listened to, where they talked about how they felt about reading this book, because I feel like Jacqueline Woodson kind of wrote this for her son in a sense, but you should definitely check that out. It's a really touching story. It is sad at times. It talks a lot about grief, so I definitely would check out the trigger warnings for this, but I highly recommend this middle grade. It is beyond touching, beyond good, and the best thing about Jacqueline Woodson is that she knocks you out in under like 200 pages. This last middle grade that I'm going to mention is pretty well known, but I don't think it's well known enough to be like concerning that a lot of people have read it, if that makes sense. But it is Nevermore. This isn't the first book. The first book is somewhere else. I don't know where she went, but this is Wonderspeth. The very first book, Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. It is told to be similar to Harry Potter. So if you guys are Harry Potter fans, or you know that your like significant other, or not significant other for middle grade, your nieces, nephews, your sisters, brothers, your family members, your friends, if you know that they liked Harry Potter but don't want to like purchase any more Harry Potter stuff, Nevermore is a great series to jump into. And there's a couple of magical series like the Spiderwick Chronicles and stuff to check out, but this is most similar because this book is all about Morgan Crow, who is cursed to die on her 11th birthday. But of course, in the first book, she kind of miraculously survives and is whisked away to this magical world that parallels her own called Nevermore. There's talking cats, there's this fancy hotel that like shapeshifts and stuff, and there's a magical school. So in the first book, she is testing to see if she can get into this wondrous society that will protect her from this curse. It's very fun, it's super quick read, it's just so whimsical and magical. So if you're looking for that kind of whimsical read and not one that's a little bit depressing but such a good read, I would highly recommend Nevermore and then Wondersmith, the second book, because they're just so fun and whimsical. We need a little fun and whimsy in our life. Even if you're in high school, an adult, that's also a fun book to read. But now let's dive into some YA contemporaries. So if you're a fan, or if your relative friend is a fan of The Sun Is Also a Star, what's another book, like a quick whirlwind romance, I would highly recommend Somewhere Only We Know. This is going to be one of the books I review for the 25 days of badass book reviews. If you don't know about that, check out my Patreon. The first one is free and available, I think, starting today, of me reviewing Grown. So this one I am going to review too. I'm doing 25 reviews for just the $5 tier on my Patreon, and that's only available in the month of December. After that, I'm gonna put it into my $10 tier if you're interested to get more book recommendations. But so this is gonna be one of them, and it's Somewhere Only We Know by Maureen Gu, which is just the cutest book ever. Basically, this story covers a pop star and a paparazzi guy, and they're in, I believe they're in Korea or Hong Kong. Where are they? They're in Hong Kong, but she's a K-pop star, and they're both Korean American, which is super exciting. We love that representation. And in Hong Kong, they are, for a day, the K-pop star wants to go out and eat a burger. And she gets caught outside in a kind of vulnerable place, and this paparazzi guy helps her, and then he realizes, oh, I could kind of make money off this situation. Let's see where this goes. And in 24 hours, this loving romance, this budding romance ensues, and it's the cutest thing, but it's also realistic because it's not immediate. It's not like, I like his face and I love him. I hate that. I hate when romance just like is all about your appearance and not about the important things, you know? So they talk a lot about their career paths. They talk about music, they talk about art, they talk about photography, they talk about what their future holds, what they want out of their life, their fears. I feel like there's a lot of deep conversations that come with like your first, second, and third date, and they're kind of stuck together for a really long time. So a lot of conversations happen. So I really appreciate that it took the time to develop the relationship while being immensely cute at the same time. So it's very like realistic and talks about real life things while still being very fictionally romancy, like, oh, we're in Hong Kong and let's do it. And also it's a really fun setting being in Hong Kong, and it's very atmospheric. They like visit very specific places that are explained in detail. Very cool. So I highly recommend that for my contemporary people who like romance. So yeah, if they liked The Sun Is Also a Star or any other kind of romantic YA stories, I'd highly recommend this one. This one is so underrated. I feel like Maureen Gu is such a great writer, and we should all check her out some more, you know what I mean? Now, this YA romance is a little bit more serious and not just a romance. It's mostly based on a sibling relationship, but there is some romance in it, and it was a bestseller. It kind of died down in popularity, so I'm just going to mention it again for readers who are up and coming into the YA genre and are still looking for like, what to read? Don't know. I'll Give You the Sun by JND Nelson. This book is so amazing. So this is a book about two twins, and their parents' relationship has kind of fallen apart, and a parent has passed away. So definitely check out the trigger warnings for this. But we read the book both when the twins were really close and young, like 13-ish, and how they didn't keep secrets from each other, and then when they're like 16, 17, when they have grown and drifted apart. And we kind of see this full circle moment of what happened to their parents, what happened to their relationship, what happened to their dreams. They're both kind of chasing art, but are they chasing art, the dream of being an artist, for the right reasons? Are they trying to please other people? There's also great representation with like LGBTQ plus members, like characters in this, so definitely I highly recommend this. This was a hyped book, so I would definitely recommend this to like newer YA people who maybe are just diving in and want like a good classic YA contemporary. This one will make you cry. It will hurt your feelings, but it will also renew your love for people and humanity. It hits you in both of the ways, both of the feels. So yeah, I also really appreciate that it's not just about the romantic interest, even though there's a little bit of that in here. And it talks a lot about chasing your dreams, what is your dreams, and who you are. I think those are the really important conversations for like the YA genre. So I would highly recommend this. Okay guys, let's talk about some YA fantasy. You know what I mean? I got 2 recommendations for you. The first one being Ray Bear by Jordan Ifugo. This one is a new release, and I find that it is on the popular side, but definitely more people can still read it. And if you're newer to the YA fantasy realm, or if you are a YA fantasy reader and you want something different, this is a really good just dive away from the traditional YA fantasies, because you know normally the YA fantasies is like a traditional like love triangle, and you think like Sarah J Maas or Red Queen or like those specific kind of books. This is very, very different. Obviously it's based on an African culture for one, but 2, the structure of the story is very different, though there is a romance in here, which is cute. I vibe with it. There's also like asexual characters in here. This follows our protagonist. Basically we live in this realm that has 11 different countries, and the crown, king, and prince, they are building councils of 11 of everybody, or like one person from each country to be on this council, and they dictate the country. Our current king is doing some shady stuff, and our main character is born to destroy this prince, basically. That's not a spoiler, it gets into it, but it's this whole battle between, should I just give in and do what I am doomed to do, or should I fight and try and do what I think is right? And what do they think is right? Because also this is a world that's very traditional, the Council of 11, that's also telepathic. There's some magic in here, obviously, high fantasy, lots of cool magic, so I highly recommend it for that. But this story is very complex. It's more than the romance. There's also some traveling involved, so it's lots of fun. So if they liked, or if this YA reader you're shopping for, or for yourself, if they liked Children of Blood and Bone, even if you liked like the Red Queen, because they had a very cool class system here, and there's the different cultures you learn about. I feel like if you like that YA fantasy, you'll definitely like this, because explores a lot of ideas of questioning authority figures and doing what's right for yourself and for the future, and not just thinking that what is told to you is correct. And there's also some LGBTQ plus representation in here, which is fabulous to see. So I would highly recommend this. It is a newer release, but I feel like it's still not widely read all the time. It's not Sarah J Maas, so definitely check it out. See if your YA reader would be interested in it. This is the next YA fantasy I'm going to recommend, and it's actually The Black Witch, which I know some of you guys might be like, wait till my wrap up so I can gush about this amazing book. But if you are shopping for a YA reader who likes long series, like Sarah J Maas, you like The Last Magician that has like really thick books that are about a lot of magic, you like series, but you also like An Ember and the Ashes and things like that. This very similar to that, if I do say so. There are trigger warnings for, there's talk of abuse, and there is actual bullying and physical abuse in this book, so I would be wary of that. Trigger warnings. Make sure to check Goodreads. This book is all about Ellerin, who is the granddaughter to this awesome mage who conquered the land for the mages and managed to enslave a lot of other races. So this book really does tackle that class system or racial structured system and Ellerin learns about it when she goes to university. So everyone in her culture, in Gardania, they get married, fasted at a young age. And her uncle was like, no, she's going to school first, she's getting an education. Ellerin, excited, is like, yay, I'm going to university, I'm gonna learn and whatever. But everyone else has this expectation that she's going to be like her grandmother. So they do abuse her a lot. And she learns that a lot of her religious beliefs aren't true. And I really also like this book for calling out religion in a way that there are so many different interpretations and perspectives. So I really enjoyed this book, and it takes its time. It's a 600-page book, and it's just the introduction to this really epic fantasy series. Every cast of characters, there's so many characters, it's a big cast of characters, but they're all unique and special in not just appearance but in their cultural beliefs. Like every character or every culture or race of creature, because there's fays and lupins and selkies and all this stuff, they all have their own beliefs of how the world came to be, and it's very much like our world. So I think it's super interesting. So if your YA reader loves long, like drawn out fantasy series with romance and epic creatures, there aren't too many fights yet, but I think that's going to come because there's obviously magic in it. The Black Witch, the awesome mage I was talking about, there's magic. But the first book is really about the school system and learning how corrupt the world is and how fearful everyone is of this new political system that's gaining control. I would highly recommend this. So good, and not even just for YA readers, but for new adults too. I feel like this, being in the university setting, even though she's 17, is still very exciting, very, just so cool. All around cool. I couldn't recommend this enough. It's all around good. Did you feel? Okay, so those are the two fantasies I recommend for YA readers. And then I'm gonna get into some adult picks that I have. So the first is a contemporary, and it is Queenie by Candace Carty Williams. I do believe you could read this as a young adult reader too, but I would be wary just because this is adult content. The woman in this book is an adult. She is working her job. I think she's 24, and this book is placed in Europe. I believe she's in London, and it's facing a lot of the racial issues that she is dealt with her ex-boyfriend, and it goes into a lot of her struggling to believe in herself and her self-love while also being a sexually active woman. So I would be cautious. There is a lot of sex in this book. It's obviously an adult book. That's why if you're a younger reader, I would just know that going in, get your approval, whatever, make sure you read the summary, make sure you like it, because this is a really hard book to read. It's you are reading about a woman who doesn't understand her worth, who does a lot of things to feel better, but in the long term it is kind of bogging her down, and she doesn't have that many female friends that are backing her up. So I'm like getting choked up thinking about it. It was a really hard book to read, but I think it's also a very good book to read as a young woman in your 20s, and even for guys to read this in their 20s. I feel like all my books have been more female recommendations. My bad. But it's my channel, so I'm just recommending you some books that I liked. Ooh, I'll get into more male-focused stories in 2 seconds. I'm going to talk about a couple things. But back to Queenie. It's a heart-wrenching book. It really is. And then it's about her getting her footing again and starting to do things for her life that make her feel worthy. Because I feel like women are sometimes taught that you need to have a relationship with someone who will just love you. But we don't understand fully what love is. Even as a 20-something-year-old, you're still working on, you know, your dreams, your aspirations, what you're willing to compromise in a relationship, what you're not. She faces a lot of racist comments when it came to her previous relationships about her hair and her shape, or being fetishized by other people. So it's such an enrapturing book, but it's heart-wrenching. So I would definitely just check out the trigger warnings and go into this just being open to that perspective and learning that yes, life is hard and learning to love yourself is hard, but it's all worth it. And to have people in your life that are meaningful and care about you is so important. So yeah, highly recommend this. And there's also a lot of talk about mental health, seeing a psychiatrist. I think at some point she goes to a therapist, and her family talking about how they don't really believe in that, but then seeing how she's in disarray, being like, okay, maybe we support you getting help because clearly we're not helping. So how can we further enrich your experience as a human, being like, I can't help you, being okay with the fact that you need help. That's okay. So that's also a great conversation that's happening in that book. This book I recommend, Queenie, and it's also not American focused, which is super cool. The other adult book I would recommend is Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. So you're like, whoa Jess, this is very different from every other book you've mentioned. Yes, I read this book in high school, and it's literally the only one I finished in high school because I feel like it was actually engaging. So this is a thriller, and suspenseful thriller in a sense. There's a murder, a family gets murdered in their house, and the murderers are on the run, and there are detectives chasing them down. It's a really interesting story. It's kind of a slow burn. We slowly get the details throughout the story, but it's still chapter by chapter engaging enough to really get your attention, and you're just kind of engrossed in understanding the murderer's perspectives. So you're like, what? Why am I thinking this way about them? So it's a very interesting book. I really recommend it. I know many people have read this, either for high school or whatnot, but if you are, you know, either a new adult, you're in your 20s, you haven't checked it out, or if you're an adult and you haven't read it yet, I would definitely check it out. It's a very engrossing story. I feel like I've said that word a lot, I apologize, but it's just, you know, one of those page turners where you're like, what is happening? Ah. I have no other way to explain it besides that it's just a very suspenseful thriller. You're wondering why you're thinking this way about these people, and then next thing you know, this big reveal, and there's so many twists and turns. So yeah, definitely recommend it for adults, even for young adults too. I think it's one of those stories that is really compelling. And then another story I would recommend, ding ding, Black Leopard Red Fox. I'm actually halfway through this. I know you're like, why are you recommending it? You haven't finished it yet. I recommend this purely for the writing style. If you are a fantasy reader and you like high fantasy and you like complex stories, whether it be science fiction, high fantasy, I feel like you're gonna love this because Marlon James has such a way with words in this. He's really speaking to you, the reader, besides the fact that that's how his prose is. He is doing this, entangling the narrative with current and past events, and he's just telling you a story, and it really seems like you're sitting down and listening to these wise people talk. And there's also these breaks when there's literally dialogue of this person talking, that person talking, this person talking. So it's really interesting, and I really love how basically the narrator is talking to you, the reader, as the inquisitor. It's kind of like an interview style, but then, you know, bouncing back current to past. This is adult. There is sex, there is abuse, there's tons of stuff, so I check out the trigger warnings. But if you're looking for a really complex, you know, adult fantasy, and you've read tons of other stuff, like, I wouldn't say Game of Thrones, but maybe Lord of the Rings, because this also has a bit of a journey in it where it's exploring different areas. Definitely check this out if you haven't. I also know that this is also a well-known popular book, so if you're trying to find more fantasy, either black or high fantasy adult fiction, I would check this out. Highly recommend. Let's get into some fun things, like some comic books. Yes, I could not leave comic books out, obviously. I love them, and I will start off first with recommending Motor Crush. This is a badass female who really doesn't know her origin. She does have an amputated arm, but she wants to be a motocross driver, I think that's what it's called, and she's great at it, she's training at it, but she needs this kind of chemical thing that's a drug to most people and kills most people. She needs it to survive, and she's not sure why. It's a bit of a mystery about it, and our lead is an LGBTQ plus member, so it's really fun. I think there's 3 volumes out now. They're all very fun, and the story is still compelling enough where it's not just like the hero defeating the bad guy. It's not like that. You really are trying to figure out this girl's life, where she comes from, how she gets these like abilities. It's very, very interesting, so I would highly recommend words are so hard, recommend Motor Crush. The next one I would recommend is Gotham Academy. Motor Crush I think is really good for a wide age range. I also think the same for Gotham Academy, so I wouldn't just recommend it to like adults and young adults, but this one I think can even go to like middle grade, so middle grade to even adults. So if you like the DC universe, you'll love this. So this doesn't actually have Batman in it, sadly, but it is Gotham Academy. So we have new students coming into Gotham Academy. The main girl is Olive, and she is, what is it, the brightest student. There are secrets. She has a case of amnesia, and she's trying to figure out what happened last summer. And she has this quirky best friend, and it's just this adventurous, fun story of this girl figuring out what happened. And there's some monsters that they're chasing, and they're solving a mystery. Very Scooby-Doo. I highly recommend it. It's fun. And I think there's like 4 volumes of this available. The last comic book I would recommend is the new Teen Titans series by Kimi Garcia and the artist Gabriel. They're so fun. So if you like Teen Titans as a kid, like I did, you'll love this. So Raven was the first one that came out. I think it's called, yeah, Teen Titans Raven. We have also Teen Titans Beast Boy out, and in February of 2021 there's a Raven and Beast Boy story coming out, which warms my heart because I just want all of the Teen Titan volumes to come out, so that way we can have stories with them all interchanging. Slade makes an appearance in this, and he makes an appearance in Beast Boys 2. It's not a spoiler, but I know they're going to all be connected at some point. But this is just a differing version of Raven's origin story. She is in high school, like she doesn't remember her mother or her like background. I think she also has amnesia, which is kind of funny. All these comic books involve people don't really knowing their origins. That's weird. But she doesn't know her origin, and she's trying to just survive high school. There's a little bit of romance, but then in the end she figures out some stuff and she has to go on an adventure. So it's just a fun comic book. I would highly recommend. And then also, if you know that the person you're shopping for likes comic books, superhero stuff, I would also highly recommend the DC Icon series. There's 4 books available right now. There's going to be a 5th one coming out that's focused on Black Canary. But there's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Catwoman. I remember them without looking. I'm so proud of myself. I would highly recommend Batman though, mostly because I feel like a lot of the books I've recommended are focused on a female protagonist. So this one has 2 perspectives, one from a female, but one from Batman. A young Bruce Wayne figuring out that he is super privileged and how he can help other people with his abilities, and slowly starting to become that Batman figure. And we're also dealing with Catwoman in this. And I really like Mary Lou's take on this. It was really genuine, very interesting, because it diverges from just like, I'm Bruce Wayne and I'm brooding and handsome and I randomly want to help save the world because my parents died and I realized they were good people, so I'm going to be a good person. It really diverges from that original story, so I really like how it was reimagined. Very, very captivating, might I add. And this is before he's like a full-fledged Batman. He's still learning, he's still making lots of mistakes. But there's still a little angsty romance in there, just in case you were wondering, in case you were concerned. The last thing I want to recommend are some mangas. So I have two manga recommendations. One is for people who like action and romance and like historical fiction. So that would be Yona of the Dawn. Literally my favorite manga ever. If you love long series, I believe there's 27 volumes out right now. I know that's intimidating, but it's such a good series. There's a lot of political intrigue, but basically in this world, Yona is a princess, her dad is the king, and she witnesses the murder of her king by her beloved, someone who she really interested and she loved deeply, killed her dad, which is rude. So she has to flee the castle with this guy named Hawk. Hawk is kind of like brooding and protective and strong, but then they go out to seek these 4 dragons, this legendary 4 dragons who are supposed to protect their king, like from generation, the first king of the land. The 4 dragons are supposed to protect him. So Yona's like, I'm gonna find these 4 and I'm gonna have them protect me, because obviously she is being chased and everyone's trying to murder her. But it gets so much more entangled than that. And it's just such a long arcing story. So I feel like people who even like Game of Thrones and like YA stories would really love Yona of the Dawn. So if you know someone who's trying to dive into manga but they're not really sure. They're like, I want something with a good plot. Definitely check out Yona of the Dawn. I do recommend getting past the first 3 volumes because Yona starts off as a really prissy princess, and it's, you want to smack her, but then she really grows into this independent woman who is able to defend for herself. And it's such a beautiful arc for a woman to be like a princess and 16 and being like sad that her dad died, was murdered by the guy she loves, and being so focused on her appearance, and then growing into someone who wants to defend herself so that way she doesn't have to rely on others and be a burden, but also wants to empower herself because she knows the future holds so many unsightly things that she needs to be prepared. Such a good manga. And the next thing I'm going to recommend is House of the Sun. I freaking love this manga. It's so freaking cute. There's a young girl who's, I believe, 17, and this older guy who's like 22, and he and her have been like family, friends, or like familiar friends since they were kids. She would always come over when he was younger in like elementary school, and they would hang out and play together. So now that they're adults, the girl doesn't like her family situation. Her parents separated and they don't really care about her too much. They don't worry about her coming home. So she decides, you know what, I'm moving in with this guy. We were friends as kids. Like, I just want to get away from my parents and their lack of love and their lack of care for me, because they literally are like, you're home, you're not home, I'm not gonna cook dinner for you, I don't. So she's super lonely because she has no siblings. So she goes to this guy's house. He's 22, so they're a little awkward, like, oh, you're gonna be living with me, I'm alone. And his family, his parents passed away when he was little, so he's trying to hold down the house and be a responsible adult and get paid and make sure that, you know, everything's covered. And his younger siblings that are, I believe, like 17 and 15 are living with their grandparents, and he's just trying to bring everybody back together and hold on to those precious childhood memories. And there's a budding romance between the two. Of course, they don't do anything during the volumes, but there's like 10 volumes. It's just hinted towards it. Basically, the whole series is just tension between the two, but it's funny and cute and dives into those conversations of like loneliness and wanting. But yeah, those are all the recommendations I have for you. It's a lot. I hope this is helpful. Let me know down below if you think it's helpful. Also check down below the Esty Stores. Make sure you go support indie businesses, you know what I mean? Go throw your money at some good people. Does that make sense? I hope so. I also feel like people have been talking in the background outside, like they're so close, and I'm so surprised. But hopefully you can't hear them, and if you did, I'm sorry. Don't worry, they're just loud neighbors, which, you know, happens. Hopefully one of these books interests you or your relatives or your friends and you think they would be interested in it. Let me know down below if you think they are, if you're gonna buy them a present. If you got into this point of the video, leave down this emoji so I know that you're the real MVP and that I respect you and love you deeply, because staying till the end of this video just means the world. But thank you guys for your freaking support. It means the world. Check down below my Patreon for my 25 days of badass book reviews. 25 book reviews. Please don't miss it out. Right now it's only gonna be $5. It's like literally like, what? So go check out my Patreon. I'm so excited to do this series, and I also make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that way YouTube actually notifies you about my videos, because they haven't been doing that. Their guidelines changed recently, so make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell if you like my videos, if you want to stick around and see more of them. But yeah, that's it for today's video. There was a lot of content. I'm really proud if you made it to the end. But yeah, I hope this video gave you a little bit more sunshine, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. There's a creepy wave. I'm sorry. Bye. Is this a better wave? Who knows?